This is 12 Tennessee haunts, the Terrify locals no one wants to visit. A dozen corners of this state where music, memory, and violence converge, and where locals sometimes steer clear after dark. Tonight we'll move from the bright marquees of Nashville to the fogged fields of Shiloh, from a cave in Adams to a tunnel people whisper about in Kingsport. 12 stops, 12 stories. Some rooted in performance and fame, some marked by loss and war. Listen, but above all, remember to treat these places and the people they represent with respect. You'll see theaters and hotels, plantations and prisons, battlefields, and one tunnel that ends more questions than answers. If this kind of haunted history draws you in, tap like and subscribe. There's more deep dives like this ahead. 12. Ryman Auditorium, Nashville, Music Hall. Built in the late 19th century as a tabernacle and turned into the heart of Nashville's live music scene, the Ryman has hosted legends and small-town hopefuls alike. Its old wooden stage and gas lamp-era balconies keep a sense of performance past folded into the architecture. Reportedly, staff and performers have heard footsteps backstage when no one was there, seen a pale figure in the wings, and felt cold drafts rolling across the stage mid-show. A longtime stagehand told a local reporter, "I've heard someone practicing a song in the dressing room when it was locked up tight." Visitors sometimes catch a single, out-of-place piano note that seems to come from nowhere. The Ryman's hauntings are wrapped in the same thing that makes it legendary: countless songs, countless late nights, and the imprint that those hours leave behind. Visual, close-ups on the worn floorboards, a slow push-in across the empty seats, a faint echo of applause. 11. Gaylord Opryland Resort, Nashville. Resort Indoor Gardens. A modern empire of glass atriums and waterfalls, the Opryland Resort is the kind of place that blends family vacations with corporate events, an enclosed world of lights and music. Beneath the orchestrated cheer, some staff and guests say they've run into something quieter and sadder. Legend says a woman sometimes appears on an upper balcony, a figure described by witnesses as hesitant and pale. Some call her Abigail in passing, though records are unclear on a single identity. Guests report hearing sobs in a hallway away from crowds, or seeing a faint silhouette reflected in the glass where no one stands. "She looked like she was waiting for someone," a night shift cleaner said once, refusing to give her name. Opryland's ghosts, if they exist, are the leftover audience for a performance that never quite ended, an echo that lingers amid the atrium waterfalls and the mall's bright storefronts. Visual, sweeping shots of the atrium, a silhouette on a balcony, distant, sorrowful echo. 10. Loretta Lynn's Ranch, Hurricane Mills, Historic Home Ranch. Loretta Lynn's Ranch is a place of folk memory, a country star's home, a family place that welcomes visitors by day. It's full of photographs, old instruments, and the sense of a life lived under both spotlight and quiet domesticity. Some who work the grounds, and those who attend the tourist days, speak of objects moving, doors opening on their own, and a persistent feeling that someone is watching from below the porch. "It felt like someone had just sat down in the chair I left," a volunteer recalled. Guests sometimes hear faint country guitar picking from an empty cabin at dusk. The ranch's murmurs connect fame to family, the grief and joy of a public life mapped onto private rooms. Visual, sun-bleached porches, a rocking chair that rocks by itself, an old guitar leaning in the corner. 9. Orpheum Theater, Memphis, Historic Theater. The Orpheum stands as a jewel of Memphis's theater district. Red velvet seats, gilded balconies, and an old stage that remembers vaudeville and the thrill of the live audience. The building's long life carries many small stories. One persistent local legend centers on a child spirit called Mary. Ushers and late-night cleaners have reported cold spots in the balcony and the sense of a small hand brushing their sleeve. She likes to sit in the back row, a former usher said quietly. Others report hearing small, high-footed steps where only carpet and empty seats remain. At the Orpheum, the past is theatrical down to its bones. The idea that an audience member might have stayed behind and never left is a kind of stage left undone. Visual: empty aisle lights, a single seat with a shadow, a piano key struck once. 8. Reed House Hotel, Indefino, historic hotel. The Reed House Hotel shows up in regional stories as a place where late-night travelers have felt more than the creak of old boards. Built in an earlier era and renovated across generations, hotels like this carry the residue of many arrivals and departures. Some guests have reported a presence in the corridor outside room 311. Doors that unlock on their own, a perfume with no source, a faint voice through the thin walls. "I woke to someone calling my name," an anxious guest recounted. The name Anissa Netherly is linked to some accounts online as a spirit sometimes blamed for lights going out and things moved from their places. Hotels are the most transient of homes. Lives overlap briefly and then vanish, and sometimes memory does not sweep everything away. The Reed House tales are less about spectacle and more about whispered human absence. Visual: dim hotel hallway, a slightly ajar door, a lamp clicked off. 7. Tennessee State Prison, Nashville, former prison closed. Once an imposing state penitentiary, this prison's stone and iron left a heavy imprint. Closed now, the old yard and cell blocks have been the setting for both historical tours and, at times, private shoots. It's also a place where the air still seems to remember the people who lived and died behind its walls. Before we go further, a safety note. The old prison is closed to public access in many areas, and some sections are unsafe. Do not trespass and obey posted closures. No story is worth risking harm or breaking the law. Former guards and ex-inmates tell of shadows moving down corridors and the sound of voices where no one stands. A contractor who worked briefly on the site said, "You'd hear footsteps in a cell that should have been empty." Visitors report an oppressive heaviness in certain cells, sudden drops in temperature, and electrical equipment that fails for no reason. The prison's atmosphere ties directly to its purpose: incarceration, isolation, and the slow passing of time. It's a reminder that institutional spaces can hold long memories. Visual: rusted bars, sun slanting through barred windows, a radio left on playing static. 6. Shiloh National Military Park, Shiloh, Civil War Battlefield. Shiloh is a place named by grief. In April 1862, this rural Tennessee ground became one of the Civil War's bloodiest early battles, and the landscape still reads like a ledger of loss: ridges, ponds, and markers clothed in morning fog. Witness reports here are never frivolous. Visitors sometimes speak of hearing distant calls, the snap of a rifle in the woods, or seeing figures marching through tree lines at dawn. "I could hear drums and a cadence like a ghost parade," a park volunteer told a local interviewer. Many of these experiences are paired with a chill that moves through a crowd, as if the terrain itself exerts a memory. Shiloh's hauntings are inseparable from its history. When a place holds such concentrated death, some people say echoes remain. Visual: low drone over fields, fog lifting off the bloody pond, the soft hammer of distant drum beats under the narration. 5. Stones River National Battlefield, Murfreesboro, Civil War Battlefield. Stones River is another field where the Civil War's toll runs deep. The battle in late 1862 produced thousands of casualties, and the rolling hills and preserved fields are studded with monuments and small, somber cemeteries. Visitors have reported sudden gusts of cold wind amid otherwise still summer days, the sensation of hands on shoulders, and the distant creak of leather, the sound of saddles and harnesses that no longer exist. "We heard a man shouting commands just ahead, and then nothing," a couple who came for a picnic once said, still shaken. At Stones River, the landscape reads like a palimpsest of courage and tragedy. The sounds people report are often described in military terms: drum, marching, commands. reminders that this is ground once filled with men in uniform. Visual, rows of white stones, a wind through tall grass, distant low horn. 4. Carnton Plantation, Franklin. Plantation home, hospital during Civil War. Carnton stands near the town of Franklin and is known both for its antebellum architecture and for the role it played after the Battle of Franklin. The house became an emergency field hospital, and the family who lived there recorded the passage of thousands of wounded through its rooms. Because of that history, Carnton is often described as a place where sorrow settled in the woodwork. Tour guides and visitors speak of seeing women in period clothing looking down from upstairs windows, of muffled sobs in rooms that now host guided tours, and of unexplained scent of camphor or old bandages. A docent once said, "People tell us they feel a presence at the sewing table where women tried to help the dying." Carnton's reported phenomena are a quiet, respectful heaviness. Not theatrical hauntings, but the palpable sense of trauma and care left by people trying to save lives. Visual, parlor with light through lace curtains, an empty bandage tray, portraits along a staircase. 3. Wheatlands Plantation, indefinable, plantation, historic site. Wheatlands appears in several regional lists of plantation sites associated with hardship and labor. Like many plantations, the place carries a marked history of enslaved people and generations whose lives were bound to the land. Visitors and caretakers say that at Wheatlands there are times when you sense the presence of people who worked the fields. The whisper of a tool, a pattern of footsteps near the old quarters, or music rising faintly from the slave cemetery at dusk. "I felt a hand on my shoulder in the quarters and turned to find no one," a researcher said, asking not to use their full name. A one-line note here: the exact modern location or name spelling is sometimes listed differently in records, indefinable for precise research. Wheatland stories, where they are recounted, are reminders that plantation sites are places of memory and pain. Any curiosity about hauntings must be tempered by respect for the real people who suffered there. Visual, field and late light, old quarters, small iron markers of graves. 2. Bell Witch Cave, Adams. Cave folklore site. The Bell Witch legend is one of Tennessee's oldest and best-known folktales. Starting in the early 19th century around the Bell family of Adams, the story mixes slaps, clairvoyant warnings, and voices with a cave outside town that people associate with the phenomenon. People who visit the cave report low, vibrating sounds, inexplicable scratches on their vehicles after a visit, and a sense of being watched by something unseen. "It followed me to my car and tapped on the window," a local who claims an encounter once said. The tale is wrapped in oral history and has been retold, adapted, and commercialized, but the cave remains a place people approach with an uneasy respect. Bell Witch stories bridge superstition, personal worst nights, and community memory. The cave itself is an evocative geography, a mouth in the earth that collects breath and rumor. Visual, flashlight beam disappearing into stone, boots on a damp path, wind sounding like low voices. 1. Sensaba, tunnel, indefinida, tunnel/roadway near Kingsport. This tunnel appears in roadside lore as a place drivers warned each other about, usually after dark. Some locals avoid the stretch of road entirely, telling stories of stalled cars, radios going silent, and strange, heavy feelings inside the vehicle. Accounts vary, and the spelling of the tunnel's name is inconsistent across sources, sometimes Sensaba, sometimes Sensaba, so the exact archival references are indefinido and should be confirmed. Eyewitnesses describe headlights dimming as they pass, mirrors fogging, and a sudden clinging sense of being observed. One person who stopped to look back later said, "The tunnel felt like a throat. Everything went quiet." As with any road legend, sensory cues are simple and chilling. The long, dark throat of a tunnel, the reflection of your own headlights, a car engine that coughs and falls silent. Treat this story as local folklore with unsettling details rather than a map.
Visual: a long, dark tunnel mouth, a car idling at the mouth, dashboard lights dimming. Mid-list reflection on Civil War sites. Pause here for a moment. The battlefields and plantation homes we've mentioned, Shiloh, Stones River, Carnton, and Wheatlands, are anchored by real human loss. Tens of thousands of soldiers died on this soil. Enslaved men and women labored and suffered for generations. When visitors report voices or apparitions on these grounds, many interpret them not as entertainment, but as reverberations of unresolved grief. If you visit these places, do so with care. Leave nothing behind, take only pictures, and remember that these grounds are memorials to people who once lived and died here. Safety reminder before the final sites. A quick, firm word on safety. Several locations on this list include closed buildings, private property, or dangerous terrain. The Tennessee State Prison is largely closed and structurally risky. The Sensabaugh Tunnel has areas that are unsafe and legally restricted. Do not trespass or attempt to enter sealed or dangerous areas. Respect signs, closures, and local warnings. After that, a few more places locals often mention in hushed tones. Tennessee State Prison Revisited, expanded note. When the prison is opened for sanctioned tours or film crews, those events are controlled and people are accompanied by professionals who can speak to the architecture and history safely. Many of the prison's strange accounts come from sanctioned visitors or employees, not those sneaking in. Reports of voices, distant laughter, and disembodied footsteps sometimes come from groups inside causeways and cell blocks during daytime tours. Prisons are places where, by design, people were kept in isolation for long stretches.
That gives any sensory report an extra measure of solemnity. It's not a setting for a thrill-seeker's prank. Additional entries and local color. Gaylord Opryland, deeper note on Abigail. Some tellings of the Opryland stories keep repeating a name, Abigail, as if a single identity gives focus to the phenomena. But staff emphasize that the name is a shorthand, born from repeated reports that coalesced into one character. Whether Abigail is a real identity, a composite memory, or simply a rumor that gained traction, the experiences described are consistent. Late-night workers report lingering sadness and a silhouette. That pattern, a repeated, nonviolent presence, shapes how employees speak about the place. The Orpheum's Mary, why child spirits resonate. Child spirits like the Orpheum's Mary are often the most haunting for audiences. A child's presence in a theater implies interrupted joy, an audience that never had a chance to clap. People are moved by that image, which is why they keep telling it. The Orpheum's custodians balance reverence and skepticism. They do not claim proof, only that the stories persist and that staff often feel watched in the dark. Reed House Hotel, Anissa Netherly and the Room That Remembers. Hotel rooms, by their nature, absorb transient sorrows, breakups, lonely nights, forgotten luggage. Reed House stories hinge on the idea that certain rooms remember those who spent long, difficult nights there. The name Anissa Netherly appears in several accounts as the spirit associated with late disturbances, but much of that is oral lore passed between guests and staff. Treat the detail as an atmosphere more than a documented biography. Wheatlands and Carnton, the weight of history. Plantations like Wheatlands and houses like Carnton force a particular tone in any ghost story, one of gravity and responsibility. Where plantation stories exist, they should always be framed with the reality of slavery and suffering. At Carnton, the narrative is recorded and public. The house served as a hospital. At Wheatlands, the archival trail might be less clear, in Defino, but the need for remembrance and respectful handling of haunting reports is the same. Bell Witch Cave, folklore versus documentation. The Bell Witch story resists simple categorization. It is oral history, sensationalized in newspapers, and often used as local folklore to draw tourists. Still, the cave retains a physicality that people respond to. The damp, the echo, the way voices carry. Many people who visit say they felt watched or heard a low hum. Others leave with nothing.
That mixture, some visitors shaken, others unaffected, is central to the Bell Witch's continued life in Tennessee's cultural imagination. Sensabaugh Tunnel, more on names and road stories. Tunnel legends thrive on a few shared elements: darkness, isolation, mirrors, a sense of being watched. The Sensabaugh tales also vary in the exact spelling and location in print.
Locals trade stories of radios dying at the tunnel mouth, or of passengers seeing something like a face in the rear view. These are car ride narratives, short, immediate, and meant to be told aloud on the way home. Reed House, again, the human element. Whether you think of a hotel presence as a ghost or as the mind filling a silent corridor, its effect on a guest is the same: discomfort, unease, the feeling of walking through someone else's memory. Hotels are places of arrival and departure. Sometimes people never quite leave. Closing coda: memory, music, and the land. We began this tour in the Ryman and the Opryland atrium, places built for sound and applause. We moved through theaters and hotels, where music and performance are part of identity. We crossed battlefields and plantations, where loss cannot be divorced from land. The stories people tell about these places tend to reflect what each site once was: the soldier who marched, the stagehand who stayed late, the woman who sewed bandages into the night, the child whose laughter echoes in a balcony. Throughout Tennessee, these 12 locations show us how place and memory interlock. Reported apparitions, unexplained sounds, and sudden chills are rarely offered as proof. They are instead testimony, reports by people who felt something worth mentioning. For some, the sense of presence is a comfort; for others, an alarm. Either way, it is a call to remember. A final reminder on safety and respect: do not trespass. Do not enter closed tunnels, fenced-off battlefields at night, or structures condemned for a reason. Many of these sites are accessible in legal, safe ways, through official tours, museums, and preserved grounds. If you visit, observe the rules, honor the dead, and leave the places as you found them. If you have a Tennessee story of your own, a place your family avoids, an encounter that made you stop listening to music the same way, share it in the comments below. Tell us where you were, what you felt, and why the memory stayed with you. If you found this journey into haunted Tennessee compelling, subscribe and share this video with someone who loves spooky history. In Tennessee, some performances never end. Whether you call them echoes, memories, or something else, these places remind us that the past sometimes refuses to leave the stage.